education in this country.
I believe that somehow looking back into the past can help you. When you think about it,
that are actually deeper than politics.
Gladwell is one of the greatest thinkers of our generation.
It was what I needed to hear personally.
He's one of the more intellectual minds.
Please give him a warm welcome.
Everybody involved in this crisis, the gravest economic crisis this country has faced since the 1930s, was very, very smart. Now that's weird. So what I want to do tonight is talk about what does it mean for an expert to fail, for our leaders, our most capable leaders, to fail. And to examine that question, I'm going to use a case study from the American Civil War. The battle I want to focus on tonight is the Battle of Chancellorsville. And at that point in the war, the two sides, the North and the South, were basically dug in on either side of the Rappahannock River. And up in Washington, D.C., Abraham Lincoln is getting very, very worried. What does Lincoln see? He sees a Yankee army that is in disarray. And what he decides to do is to bring in fresh leadership. And the guy he brings in is a guy called Fighting Joe Hooker. Hooker is this tall, charismatic, blue-eyed, barrel-chested, square-jawed. He's got a commanding presence and a commanding voice, and he's got a brilliant mind, and he comes in and it's like night and day. I mean, the men look at him and all of a sudden their morale is raised. And more importantly, though, he completely reorganizes the Union Army. And he creates something called the Bureau of Military Information. What it was is one of the very first military intelligence units. One historian writing about the Battle of Chancellorsville famously says that by the spring of 1863, Hooker knew more about Lee's army than Lee knew. So Hooker sits down and he says, our plan is perfect, and it is perfect. And that night, it's one of those beautiful moonlit nights, and Hooker sets up a big stage, and all of his men are before him in this clearing outside of Chancellorsville, and he stands up before them, and he gives this extraordinary speech to his men. And he ends with, God Almighty cannot prevent me from victory tomorrow, right? And they all stand up and they cheer. To me, everything you need to know about what happened is composed in that moment. And when you are in that state, when you're in the grip of that kind of overconfidence, the world around you can change, and you don't see it. Now, when I say that Chancellorsville is the great allegory for the financial crisis, this is what I mean. Because I think that many of the key decision makers in that catastrophe on Wall Street were like Hooker. Right? And why were they like Hooker? Because over the course of the last couple of decades, what did we do to people in key positions in financial services? Well, we gave them a series of tools that led them to believe that they were in perfect command of the market, that they understood perfectly what their risks were. And given that illusion of perfect information, it was Hooker all over again. Success leads to confidence, right? Confidence leads to overconfidence, and then overconfidence leads to disaster. So, back at Chancellorsville, dinner time. They set their rifles to the side and they start munching on this meat because tomorrow they're going to chase Lee all the way back to Richmond. And then all of a sudden, they hear a sound. Don't understand what it is. It sounds like beating wings or something, and all of a sudden they see all these quail coming out of the forest like this, as if something or someone is chasing them. And they say, that's the damnedest thing. Who would be chasing quail at this hour? And they go back to their dinner, and then they hear another sound, and it's even louder and more ominous this time. And they look up and they realize, oh my goodness, right? And they see all of Lee's men with their bayonets fixed, shouting out the rebel yell, come charging out of the forest, right, aimed right at them. And these men who outnumbered their opponent 2-1, who knew more about their enemy than their enemy knew about himself, who God Almighty could not prevent from victory, drop their rifles and abandon their dinner and run for their lives. Well, there's a postscript to the Battle of Chancellorsville. Robert E. Lee is emboldened. So what does he decide? He decides he's going to cross the Rappahannock and venture for the first time into Yankee territory. Now, we all know, and he surely knew, that there were all kinds of risks involved with that. So why did he do it? Because it was his turn to be overconfident. Right? And at Gettysburg, Robert E. Lee suffers the most grievous defeat of the war. Gettysburg is the reason, is the moment that the war turns in favor of the North. And the lesson of that battle is exactly the same as the lesson of the 1929 crash and the lesson of the 2007 crash. And that is, when it comes to solving our hardest problems, we think we need to rely on the expertise of our leaders. We don't. We need to rely on the humility of our leaders. Thank you.
Just to get young people engaged with thinking on that level bodes well for Chattanooga.
He had put so much thought into my generation and the future of my generation.
A political culture and a business culture that favors the overconfident has been foisted on us, right? And we have sort of falsely accepted it. And it's counter to our values as a country. If you say that what we mean by success is someone doing meaningful work? If you define success that way, then humility becomes absolutely essential. Incompetence annoys me. Overconfidence terrifies me.